All right, so I've gone ahead and busted all the forms off. It was about 24 hours after the pour, so the concrete's still very green. We were able to pull all the forms off without oiling down the forms to begin with and without breaking any concrete after the fact, so that was good. The problem areas were obviously over here where we had to put those spacers in and the little header ledge or whatever, because we have an elevated footer, if you will, for the new foundation for the bricks to sit on. And then we have this 5-inch pretty much sidewalk all the way through the shops. Two different heights. I think that's about 8 inches, the height of the standard brick, because it matches up with the existing top brick line, and then obviously 5 inches through the rest of it. So a little bit of difference in height. I needed to put that header bar there, which ultimately kind of trapped that little piece of wood in after the concrete cured. So that took a little bit of time to get out, but we're pretty much ready to start laying brick, and that's something I've never done. This ought to be fun. I did say I'd never done that before, didn't I? That was a complete and total waste of about 3 hours because I got absolutely nothing accomplished. I can understand why you have to be like labeled a mason to do that kind of stuff and be invited to like join a guild or something, because that is way harder than it looks. And I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm probably gonna go do some more research and try to tackle this again tomorrow. Hopefully get some progress done, because I used a half a bag of mortar about 3 hours of time and got nothing done. I knew it was gonna be kind of difficult fitting it into the keyholes and things like that. I really didn't want to stair step it all the way out, because that means I'd have to pretty much do that all the way back to that corner, and that's too many courses of brick. Doing it this way, just sliding them back into where they need to be, I don't have the right technique, so I'm gonna go try to figure out if there's a better way to do it, and then try it again tomorrow. So good night. All right, day 2. Let's see if we get some better results than last night. I think the main issue was the mortar mix. Obviously it wasn't sticking properly. I don't think I mixed it properly. I was going for more, or I wasn't really going for anything because I have no idea what I'm doing, right? But I ended up with more of a kind of an ice cream mixture. It was nice and velvety and just kind of split open, and I think that was too stiff. So what you want is more of a mashed potato consistency, not cream corn. That's too liquidy. It's more that'd be too soupy, but nice mashed potato, just even consistency. And there's so much stuff out there, just like concrete, that says don't add more water than you need. So I think I was overly abundantly cautious about adding too much water, and in turn didn't add enough water. So it made it unworkable for my skill set. So we're gonna give it a second chance today, and hopefully we come up with some better results and actually get a brick set. Let's get busy. First brick is laid. It was definitely the mix last night. It was way too dry, or at least drier than it should have been. So today we get it all mixed up right. I came up with about 4 scoops of a 32-ounce paint mixing cup to 1 32-ounce thing of water. That worked out consistency for these small batches to be pretty perfect. Since the first brick is laid, that's the first brick I have ever laid in my life. That's fun, learning new stuff. And I guess you could say I'm a mason now. Let's mix up some more and set another bricks, and then we're gonna mix up a pretty big batch, and we're gonna fill in the cores full of grout. That way, at least that first course is nice and solid. That rebar is grouted in properly. The whole first bottom row where we poured the new foundation, the elevated foundation, is very nice, solid, good base to build up from. Let's get busy doing that. All right, so that's 3 scoops to 1 scoop of water. I'm gonna mix that up and show you what a too liquid or too soupy, too thin mortar mix looks like. All right, so you can see this mix is entirely too thin. It's just pretty much like cream corn. It's pretty soupy. It runs off. Entirely too thin. It has no build to it, no firmness whatsoever. It's just pretty much gritty water. And that's way too thin. So what we're gonna do, and you can see as you rake it back and forth in there, it will stiffen up, but this is way too thin to use. Obviously, mortar's gonna get hard, because that's what it does. But you can see as I push the hoe through, how it just kind of fills back in on the back side of it. Just like soup. And that's not what you want. So we're gonna add another scoop and show you what proper mix looks like. Let's see how it's not getting that nice flake
like it was before, almost like ice cream. It's breaking apart, kind of like mashed potatoes. That's what you kind of want. So it's got enough build, but it's not, you know, it's not keeping its shape exactly like it was before. But all those little granules and everything, you can kind of smooth out if you wanted to with ease. And then you can also do the whole snapping on the trowel thing. I could never do that right, so I'm gonna let that set up a bit. Now once you've got it all mixed up together, you let it sit for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then you come back and check it. Wait for all that water to get absorbed. And right now it looks to be a little dry. See how it's breaking up almost like ice cream? So we'll check it again in about 3 to 5 minutes and then see how it comes out. But see how it's holding its shape a lot better? Like when you rake the hoe, it just kind of breaks up. So it's probably a little stiff. Now this is what the mix looks like when it's a little bit too stiff. See how I'm just scraping the trowel across and it's breaking up and it almost looks like scooping ice cream. That's a little bit too stiff. You can kind of, you know, push the air and shape it, but that's a little bit stiffer than I want it. That's probably the proper mix, but again, I'm not a, you know, mason and I have no idea what I'm doing. So don't take this as factual advice or to be true. So experiment and find out what works for you. But that's kind of the consistency I had last night and had no success with it. So, all right, we mixed up our original ratio of 4 cups of the Type S mortar to 1 cup of water. We've actually done a double batch here, so it's 8 cups of mix to 2 cups of water, and that's 32-ounce containers. I've let this sit up for about 5 minutes after being very well mixed, and I'll just kind of show you pretty much what you're looking for. Again, I'm not an expert. I just learned how to do this yesterday, but I'm just going to stick my hoe in and rake back. And you see these walls right here? See how they just kind of slumped in, but they didn't actually fall? So that's kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for the mortar to stand up a little bit, have its own support, if you will, and to kind of have some stiffness and firmness to it. Again, I'll just stick it in and pull straight back, and the tops just kind of slump over, but nothing really connects in the middle. If when you pull that rake through, you get these, obviously I tapped and kind of vibrated the bucket to get it to look like this. It is the proper thickness right now, but if you were to just to pull your rake or your hoe back, and those tops kind of just slumped over like that without vibrating the bucket, it just kind of became a glob. That's too thin. So thicken it up a little bit, mix it some more, and then after you get done mixing, let it sit for about 3 to 5 minutes. And you can see when I push this back into place, it holds its form. You know, see that wall right there? That's kind of what you're looking for it to support itself a little bit. And then if you just kind of go in with the trowel, you should be able to carve in, you know, some nice little designs, and it look like mashed potatoes. That's pretty much the consistency. You can do the snap thing. I never had good luck with that. It falls off the trowel anyway, and I don't know if my trowel's not gritty enough or what, but figure out what works for you. All right, I've gone ahead and mixed up another double batch, but I left this one a little bit loose. So what that means is there's not enough mix in there. There's more water than should be. So loose, runny, it all means the same thing, right? So I'm going to show you kind of what I was talking about the raking technique and it not having enough body on its own. See, I'll just pull this through and see how the sides just slump in. That's too loose. That does not have enough build. It doesn't have enough stiffness to the actual mortar, and it's only going to run. Obviously, it's running the bucket. Wherever you try to place it, it's going to run and not hold up the brick. So we'll add our last cup in, mix it up, and show you what the proper ratio looks like again. Alright, so we've got all this mixed up. We've let it set for 3 to 5 minutes, and we'll just pull the rake through and see how those edges nice and formed. We push this back into place. Do it one more time. See how it's holding its shape a lot better? We'll just pull that back, and just the tops fall over. So that's kind of what you want. At least I think it is. I'm not a bricklayer. I'm just some guy like you trying to figure out how to do this on a project I'm working on. So, hope that helps. Good luck.
I didn't say I was going to be winning any awards for fastest block layer. We're on day 3, and I think we're going to be able to finish up laying the remaining blocks. All we have is 2 courses and then the cap block. A total of about 8 blocks remaining, so we should be able to finish that up today. We're going to go ahead and mix up some mortar again and get started. We're down to the last brick. We had to make a little cut. It needs to be 8.5 inches. So it's a little bit more than a half brick, but these are cap blocks and they don't sell half cap blocks. So we had to make a little cut. And now we got to cut a little piece of the 2x4 off so we can slide it up in there, or we can pull our middle block out and then slide it up and slide it over. But I don't really feel like doing that because I'm going to take these 2x4s off anyway when we build our little studded wall. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that little section of wood out. And then we'll get our last block in place. And just in case you're wondering, we're not putting mortar in between the joints as we have with the rest of the blocks, and where we mortar the joint and then set the block on top and squish it down, because this is pretty much pinched up to the top plate, the sill that goes all the way around the building and ties everything together. We're pretty much having to put the block up there, wedge it up in place, put a 3/8 inch wood spacer in between, and then we're just gonna fill in almost like tucking the mortar in to all the joints and all the spaces. We'll wait for that to solidify a little bit, and then we'll pull the spacers out and do a nice little mortar finish. So that's how you do the last brick. At least that's how I'm gonna do the last brick. I don't know if there's another way to do it, but it makes sense to me, right? So that's what we're gonna do. All right, so we're about a week past where we poured this little elevated sidewalk slab footer area. Did wet it down in the morning and wet it back down again in the evening, just a nice little mist coat, and then covered it back up with plastic, and that's so the proper cure rate can be achieved. If you don't do that, the outside dries faster than the inside, or cures faster than the inside. And that will lead to basically adhesion problems. There's a specific term, I'll try to post the word here for that, but it basically delaminates from itself because it hasn't cured into one solid object. It's cured at different rates, and that allows little fractures to occur in whatever structure you have created. So this thing has been poured for a week. We've wet it every day, twice a day for the past week, covered it up with plastic. Our little metal trowel finish has come out beautifully. And that's the first time I've ever been able to hand smooth something like that. So the edges, not so much. I need to get better at edging. So this was only my second time pouring a concrete slab or anything like that in my life. We did have the truck show up because that was about 2.5 yards worth of concrete that we ordered. We probably dumped about a 1/4 yard, but you want a little bit extra. Order about 10 to 15% extra on whatever you've calculated, just in case you end up spilling some or have some waste, in which you will. I promise you, you will. So order extra. It's much better to end up with a little bit of extra concrete that you have to dispose of than to not have enough and then have to go out in the middle of a pour while everything's still wet and grab some bag concrete and mix it up yourself. So 2 yards was more than enough concrete that I wanted to mix, because I've done that stuff before. On my first pour, we mixed about 80 something bags. So that's more than I ever want to do again. And I had help on that one. I did not have help on this one. The only thing we did have is that little yard buggy, which made things immensely easier. So after we got everything in, screed it out, smoothed out, we hand troweled it with the mag float and then the finish trowel, and it came out baby butt smooth. We turned our attention after that to the block wall. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got the block wall finished. It's finally done. We got all the cap blocks set, and all we did was just set those in place, put a 3/8 inch spacer on all 4 corners, inside and out, shoved a ton of mortar in there, waited for that to set up and solidify a little bit, and then we pulled out the spacers. The block did not move at all, so that was a sufficient repair or way to do that repair. And then once that spacer was removed, obviously we had a gap in there that we had to fill in, so we just shoved some more mortar in there and then did the final tooling of the joint just like we had done the rest of the wall. We had to spray a little bit of mist on the inside and the outside especially because it was drying quicker than the inside. Obviously the sun's shining on it and everything like that, so we kept misting it a couple times a day for a few days and then waited for it to cure. We got all that situated, and this is probably one of the most exciting things that I've done in this shop in a while. I know that may be kind of weird and boring for most people, but that was the first time that I had ever done any kind of masonry work whatsoever in my lifetime. I've put tiles in the house before, and that was my first time tiling anything, so that was fun. But this is my first time actually working with mortar and setting a cinder block and doing any kind of structural foundation block work. So that was fun to learn about, exciting to, educate myself on a few different things that I normally don't get to do in here. I'm a metal shop guy, I'm a car guy, machinery, all that kind of stuff. So I've done carpentry work before. I work with wood and lumber and everything, but I've never done any block work. Being that it's such a niche specialty, and unless you have a massive project that you're doing, it's hard to get people to bid on. That was kind of the reason that I ended up doing this myself. If you recall, I did have some foundation experts come out and look at this issue as to why the wall had separated in the first place, and foundation experts are kind of like chiropractors. And no offense if there's any chiropractors out there, but when a foundation specialist comes in, they're only going to offer solutions on fixing your foundation. They're not going to offer solutions that may not involve foundation work or repair. And the way they fix foundations is they drill into the ground, they hit solid bedrock, and they put these long steel, what they call piers, and find a way to attach them to your existing slab and then jack that back up into its original position. presumably because the soil beneath it has either shifted, eroded, or collapsed on itself, or was never compacted properly originally. So they all assume those things coming out when they look at a job, and that's probably what happened here. The soil compacted a little bit, or was eroded because we did have some water issues around the shop when we first got it. I've since cleared out all the trees behind the shop and on the side of the shop, and no more water intrusion, so soil degradation or erosion, as far as I know, no longer occurs. And that was pretty much evident by the gap that this wall had when we bought the place was the same exact gap that it had 5 years later. So all the foundation experts came out and told me that I needed the piers, I needed to do this, I needed to do that. The cheapest quote was $8,000. The most expensive quote was $22,000. And in those quotes, all that would have included is them drilling into the ground, setting their steel pier system, and they're all patented, they're all different, but they all do basically the same thing. They get down to bedrock or solid rock underneath the soil, and they provide a solid foundation or footing for them to leverage against the existing slab. All of those quotes included just that. It was basically drilling into the ground, setting the pier, and lifting up the foundation if they could achieve it. That did not include any of the concrete wall work that we did a few weeks ago. We're chipping everything out. That would not have included pouring this new slab and connecting the foundations like should have been originally. That wasn't included. They wouldn't have done any landscaping work whatsoever, and they consider any dirt moving whatsoever landscaping work. The only dirt they would have moved would be to dig out and access the holes to attach their piering system to the existing slab. So $8,000 to $20,000 was about $8,000 to $20,000 more than I was willing to spend. So the biggest question some of you probably have is how much did I spend doing all this myself, and obviously in turn how much I saved by not hiring a foundation expert to come out and pretty much not do anything that I ended up doing. Again, all they would have done is set the piers. So for me chipping out the wall, that had to be done. It was going to be done, and I did that. That would not have been included in their $8,000 to $20,000 bid. I rented the concrete saw for about a little over $500, and then about $200 in diamond blades. I just bought the 3-pack because I figured with all the embedded material in the concrete, I would probably chip, crack, or break a blade, or with the amount of cutting that I would go through at least more than one blade. And I did. I used all three. They're not all three used up to their complete useful lifespan, but it was worth it for me to spend $200 in blades. So that was about $700, $750 by the time you include fuel and gas for the little concrete saw and everything like that. So we'll say $750 for concrete removal, and then plus I bought a little $65 wheelbarrow, so that goes into it just over $800, and we just dumped all the material outside. I'll haul that off at a later date, so that's not included in this disposal fee if you have a landfill or something like that around your neck of the woods that you would go drop this off to. There is a concrete recycling plant right down the road, so I don't know if I'll be able to take it over to them and have them recycle it or crush it, basically recrush it, and then sell it on whatever they do with that. So I don't know as far as that goes. But it was a little over $800 for me to come in here and remove everything. Plus I had to get a new jackhammer. The little one that I had was great for drilling holes for the lift and everything like that. It's just a rotary jackhammer. The other jackhammer that I got was a Harbor Freight buy. It's a Bauer, and it was a little bit over $200. And then I did not buy the chisels from Harbor Freight. I went to Home Depot and bought some Milwaukee brand chisels. From my experience, everything at Harbor Freight as far as blades, chisels, or hardened steel is just not up to par. So maybe that'll change in the future, but my experience has not been good so far when it comes to using that kind of stuff. And knowing that I didn't want something to fail, I didn't mind spending another $5 or $10 on a name brand chisel. I'm not a big proponent of name brands or brand loyalty or anything like that, but I kind of knew what I was getting or not getting at one location or the other. So total tally is a little bit over $1,000 to buy the jackhammer, rent the concrete saw, buy the blades, get everything chipped out, plus the wheelbarrow. I think we're like $1,050. We'll call it $1,100, right? Next thing we have is the concrete that we actually had to form up and pour. I think I have about $100 in lumber and forms and screws and everything like that. We'll call it $100. Next up, we have the actual concrete itself, the concrete job. We have $650 worth of concrete around here. It's about $150 a yard. We bought just over 2 yards. We bought 2.5 yards, so that was about we'll call it $75 in concrete. They charge you a short load fee, which is any load under a certain amount of yards. We only bought 2.5 yards. I think their minimum yard without that fee is 6 yards. The truck goes up to 10 yards. I didn't need anything. I actually had leftover concrete from this 2.5 yard order. So obviously if I would have ordered more, I would have had more to dispose of, or a much bigger area to pour, which I was not set up for footing or foundation wise or forms. So we just bought what we needed for this job right here. So that total order plus the short load fee, the taxes, environmental fees, delivery charge, and all that other stuff came to $650. You're probably saying to yourself, well, wouldn't bags be cheaper? Yes, bags would be cheaper. At an 80-pound bag at $3-something, I came up with, I would have needed about 90 or 96 bags to do what I needed to do, plus any overage. I wouldn't have had as much to dispose of. I could have just returned the extra bags. However, it was just not worth the hassle. By the time I would have rented a concrete mixer, which would have cost an additional $70 a day, by the time you factor all that in, plus the time and everything like that, basically it came down to the logistics, right? I'm just one guy working alone in my shop. Again, I don't have any friends. I just have you guys, in which I try to entertain as much as possible. While it would have been entertaining for you to watch me load the bags into this little 2-bag mixer and then pour them into the hole, the problem would have been by the time I got about halfway done and still had half to go, I would have been dead dog tired. I would have been worn out, and the concrete would have already been curing on one side before I even got halfway done. So that's just not how I wanted to do it. It was well worth the extra $100 or $150. It mathematically is what it came out to be difference-wise for me to have a truck show up. There was an additional cost. I spent $105 to rent the motorized buggy. You can get the non-motorized Georgia buggies for like $25 a day. The motorized hydraulic dump buggies were $100 a day. And for me, again, working alone, that was probably one of the wisest decisions I could have made, was to spend $650 on concrete to have it delivered and mixed up with fiber, extra strength, all that good stuff. 3,000 PSI mix. They mixed it perfectly. It loaded in the buggy amazingly, and then I was able to dump half a yard at a time out of that buggy, which was way faster. I had the whole thing done in like 30 minutes. We were off the truck. And that's me, again, me working by myself. So I had enough work ahead of me screeding everything out that that was labor intensive enough. So if I would have had to mix the concrete, screed it, and then smooth it, like I would have been wasted as far as energy levels go. So for the concrete, it was $650 to have it mixed up and delivered, 3,000 PSI with fiber, mixed perfectly, water ratio and everything. It was $105 for me to rent that motorized hydraulic buggy, and that was a lifesaver. I had enough labor ahead of me with getting everything smooth, screeded, mag floated, and then troweled out that I didn't want to have to worry about mixing bags and proper ratios and all that other stuff. So $650 for the concrete, $105 for the buggy rental, about $100 in form boards and screws to set all that stuff in, and then about another $100 in plastic, rebar, wire ties, the rebar chairs, and all the other stuff, that the base rock and everything else that we used to prep everything before the concrete got here. So we'll call that $950. It might have been $1,000 to do the concrete section. So I think we're still less than like $2,000 so far. Now let's turn our attention to the block wall and how much that project cost. All total, we replaced about 25 blocks, and they're a mixture between 3 cap blocks, I don't know, 16 or 17 whole blocks, and then 6 half blocks. So All total, we replaced 25 blocks in total at an average cost of $1.85 a piece, just under 50 bucks worth of block. We used 6 bags of type S mortar mix. That's probably way more than any mason would use, but I couldn't get a lot to stick. So it was trial and error, or trowel and error. Speaking of trowels, I had to buy some trowels. So we had the pointed trowel. And I'll say this, I bought the biggest one I could, and it was like 15 or 30 bucks, something like that. They're not cheap. I would not go with the biggest one you could find because it takes more effort to work, especially if you're working in confined areas. Maybe if you're setting whole perimeter block walls, 11 1/4 is great, or 11 1/2, whatever the dimensions are. But to work in small confined areas, I would get a much smaller, 7-inch, maybe 9-inch, maybe would be the biggest one. Trowel. So I got that. I got the pointing tool. I got the joining tool. I got the mortar mixing little bucket thing. I got the small one, not the big one. So all total, it's 6 bags of type S mortar mix, 25 blocks, which is about 50 bucks, another 40 something in mortar, and probably another, we'll call it 50 bucks in hand tools to be able to use to put all the blocks together. I already had levels and everything else in the shop, obviously, so we didn't have to buy those. So to repair that foundation, gable, leaning, separated block wall, I think we only had about 150 bucks in it. So grand total, I think we're still less than 2,300 bucks. And that's if I'm forgetting anything. So we'll call it, 2,500 at a wag, and we'll say definitely less than 3,000 bucks for me to fix all this stuff, which is a heck of a lot cheaper than the cheapest quote I got to repair the foundation of $8,000. Remember, the most expensive quote was $20,000. I wasn't going to spend either of those amounts, and I did it on myself anyway, which, by the way, everything that we did in these projects would not have been included in that $8,000 to $20,000 quote that they provided. All they would have done is come out, drill into the ground, set their proprietary piering system, attach it to the slab, and then leveled the slab the best of their ability, which may not have been level at all. So I didn't want to take the risk of spending all that money and then not having it fixed, and spend all that money and still have to do all these jobs that we just completed. So it was much more fun for me to do it myself and learn a little bit along the way. Hopefully it was just as much fun for you to come here, watch this stuff, learn a little bit yourself, and tackle whatever projects you have waiting for your quarantine chronicles yourself, your honey-do lists, and everything else that you have stacking up in the background on your to-do list. Get out there, check them off, get them done, and until next time, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to smash, destroy, obliterate that like button. If you found this content useful, please subscribe. We appreciate it, and until next time, thanks for watching this video.